It was a quiet night when Jake started his shift at Walmart. The store had just switched to 24-hour service, and he had taken the night shift for extra pay. It seemed easy, just stocking shelves, helping the few customers that came in, and making sure everything stayed clean. But there was something strange about Walmart at night. The bright lights flickered sometimes, casting eerie shadows. The aisles seemed longer, stretching endlessly in both directions. And the security cameras, he could swear they moved on their own, as if watching something unseen. Jake clocked in at 11 p.m. He met his co-workers, Lisa and Mark, near the front registers. Lisa was cheerful as always, but Mark seemed nervous. "I hate working nights," Mark muttered. "Weird things happen." Lisa laughed. "Like what? Ghosts stealing toilet paper?" Mark didn't laugh. "You'll see." Jake didn't believe in ghosts, but he had heard rumors. Employees whispered about strange noises, missing items, and shadows moving without a source. Some even said that people had disappeared in the store, but that was just a story, right? Around midnight, Jake was stacking cereal boxes in aisle 12 when he heard a sound. Click, click, click. It was like someone tapping their fingernails on a metal shelf. "Lisa?" he called, but no one answered. The sound came again. It was behind him now. He spun around, expecting to see Mark playing a prank, but the aisle was empty. A shiver ran down his spine. He grabbed his cart and pushed it quickly toward the front of the store, telling himself it was just his imagination. At 1 a.m., Mark went to the break room, leaving Jake and Lisa alone. "I'll be in the toy section," Lisa said. "Some kids made a mess earlier." Jake nodded and went to restock the freezer section. As he walked past aisle 22, the lights flickered. He glanced down the aisle and froze. It was dark, not just dim, completely black. The store's bright overhead lights should have lit every aisle, but aisle 22 was covered in thick darkness. Jake hesitated. "Lisa?" No answer. He took a step closer. His shoes squeaked on the floor, but the aisle swallowed the sound. Then, something moved inside the darkness, a tall shadow. It had long arms and fingers that stretched almost to the floor. Jake's heart pounded. He turned and ran. When he reached the toy section, Lisa was gone. The shelves were perfectly neat. There was no sign of her. "Lisa?" he called, but only silence answered. He checked the break room, thinking she had gone on break. But Mark was the only one there, scrolling on his phone. "Where's Lisa?" Jake asked. Mark looked up. "She never came in here." Something was very wrong. At 2 a.m., Jake and Mark decided to search for Lisa. As they walked past the electronics section, the TVs all turned on at once. Static filled the screens. Then, a whispering voice came through the speaker. "Help!" Jake and Mark froze. The voice was familiar. "Lisa?" Jake whispered. The TVs flickered. The static changed, forming a blurry image. It was aisle 22, the dark aisle, and in the middle of it stood Lisa, her face pale and eyes wide with fear. The whispering voice came again. "It's coming." Then the screens shut off. Jake and Mark stared at each other. "We have to get her," Mark said. They ran to aisle 22. The darkness was still there, thick and unnatural. It didn't move like a normal shadow. It pulsed, almost like it was breathing. Jake took a deep breath and stepped forward. The air inside the dark aisle was cold, freezing cold. The shelves stretched high above him, taller than any aisle should be. And at the far end, Lisa stood with her back. "Lisa!" Jake called. She didn't move. Mark grabbed his arm. "Something's wrong." Lisa turned. Her face was pale, her eyes completely black. Her mouth opened wide, too wide, stretching as if her jaw was unhinged. Then she screamed. A horrible, ear-piercing sound that made the shelves shake. The darkness behind Lisa shifted. It wasn't just a shadow, it was alive. A tall, faceless figure stepped forward, its arms long and thin, fingers curling like claws. Jake grabbed Mark. "Run!" They sprinted toward the front of the store, but the aisles stretched endlessly. No matter how fast they ran, the exit seemed farther away. The lights flickered. The thing was behind them. Then, the intercom crackled to life. "Attention, Walmart shoppers," a distorted voice said. "The store is now closing." The lights went out. Jake didn't stop running. His lungs burned, but he pushed forward. Suddenly, the front doors were in front of him. He grabbed Mark and dove through. They tumbled onto the cold pavement outside. The doors slammed shut behind them. The store was silent. The lights inside flickered once, then went completely dark. Lisa was still inside, but she wasn't Lisa anymore. Jake and Mark never spoke of that night. Walmart fired them for abandoning their shift. The manager refused to listen to their story. The next day, Lisa's name disappeared from the employee records. It was as if she had never worked there. That Walmart is still open, but something is different. Aisle 22 no longer exists. And at night, if you listen closely near the toy section, you might hear whispering voices calling for help. But if you go looking, you won't come back. Months passed. Jake and Mark tried to forget what happened, but the memories never faded. Lisa's face, pale and frozen in terror, haunted Jake's dreams. He woke up in cold sweats, hearing whispers in the dark. One night Mark called him. "I went back," Mark said, his voice shaky. Jake sat up in bed. "What? Why would you do that?" Mark sighed. "I had to know if it was real, if we imagined it." Jake felt a chill. "And?" Mark hesitated. "The store looks the same, but something's off." Jake swallowed hard. He didn't want to know more. "Don't go back," he warned. But deep inside, he knew it wasn't over. A few weeks later, Jake was scrolling through social media when a post caught his eye. It was a hiring ad for the same Walmart. Now hiring night shift workers. His stomach dropped. Beneath the ad was a picture of a new employee, a girl with dark hair, smiling at the camera. Her name tag said Lisa. Jake's blood ran cold. It wasn't Lisa. Not the real Lisa. The smile on her face was wrong, too wide, too perfect. Something inside her eyes wasn't human. Jake knew he had to stop whatever was happening. He called Mark. "Meet me at Walmart, midnight." Mark hesitated. "Jake, no." "She's back," Jake said, or something pretending to be her. There was silence. Then Mark sighed. "Fine, one last time." At midnight, they met in the Walmart parking lot. The store was still open, bright and empty. Employees walked inside like normal, but something was wrong. Their movements were stiff, mechanical. Their eyes were blank, like dolls. Jake and Mark waited until the store closed at 2 a.m. Then, they snuck around the back, finding the employee entrance. Mark picked the lock, something he had learned years ago. The door clicked open. They slipped inside. The store was dark, too dark. As they moved through the aisles, Jake noticed something strange. Aisle 22 was back. It shouldn't exist. They had checked during the day, it was gone. But now in the darkness it stretched out before. Mark swallowed hard. "Are we really doing this?" Jake nodded. "We have to." They stepped inside. The air turned ice cold. The shelves were impossibly tall. The aisles stretched longer than they should. They weren't in Walmart anymore. A whisper echoed through the aisle. "Help!" Lisa's voice. Jake and Mark ran forward. And then they saw her. Lisa stood at the end of the aisle, her back turned. "Lisa!" Jake called. She didn't move. The shadows shifted around her. Then she turned. Her eyes were black voids. Her mouth stretched unnaturally wide. She let out a scream. The darkness behind her came alive, forming a towering figure with long clawed hands. It reached for them. Jake grabbed Mark's arm. "Run!" They turned to flee, but the aisle never ended. The shelves blurred, the world twisted. Then suddenly, silence. They stood in a pitch-black void. Walmart was gone. Lisa was in front of them. The real Lisa. Her body was fading, like smoke in the wind. She whispered, "They take all of us." Jake's heart pounded. "Who?" Lisa's eyes filled with fear. "The store isn't real," she said. "It's a trap. It eats people. The night shift, no one ever quits. They just disappear." The shadows behind her pulsed. "They're coming," she whispered. Jake grabbed Lisa's hand. "We're leaving." Lisa shook her head. "I can't." The shadow creature loomed closer, stretching its clawed fingers. Mark yelled, "Go!" Jake pulled Lisa with all his strength. The world blurred, and suddenly they were back in Walmart. The lights flickered. Aisle 22 was gone. Lisa was gone. Mark and Jake stood there, breathing hard. Everything looked normal. Employees walked by, oblivious. Had it all been a dream? Then, over the intercom, a voice spoke. "Attention, Walmart shoppers. The store is now closing." The lights flickered again, and in the reflection of the freezer doors, Lisa was watching them. But she wasn't alone. Behind her, in the glass, the shadow moved, and it was smiling. "I have a story to tell. It happened 2 years ago, but I still think about it every single night. It haunts me. It changed me. I used to work the night shift at Walmart. It wasn't the worst job, but it wasn't great either. My shift started at 10 p.m. and ended at 6 a.m. Most of the time, it was quiet. We had a few customers who came late at night, mostly people grabbing snacks or last-minute groceries. One night, something happened that I can't explain, and I don't think I ever will. It was around 2 a.m. when I saw him, a man in a long brown coat, standing in aisle 14, staring at the shelves. At first, I didn't think much of it. Customers do weird things all the time, but when I walked past the aisle again 10 minutes later, he hadn't moved. He was still standing there, staring at the same spot. I decided to check on him. "Sir, do you need any help?" I asked. He didn't answer. I stepped closer. "Sir?" Slowly, he turned his head to look at me. His face was pale, his eyes sunken deep into his skull. He didn't blink. Then he spoke. "They never close," he whispered. His voice was rough, like sandpaper. "Even when they say they do." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Are you okay?" I asked. He smiled, a slow, painful smile that stretched his thin lips. "You'll see," he said. Then he turned and walked away. I watched him go. He moved strangely, his body jerking slightly with every step. I felt sick just looking at him. I went to tell my manager, Mark, but Mark just laughed. "Probably just some weirdo," he said. "This is Walmart. We get all kinds." I didn't feel right about it, but what could I do? So I went back to work. At around 3 a.m., the store got weird. The lights flickered. I thought it was just a power issue, but then I noticed something else. The music had stopped playing. Normally, Walmart plays soft music over the speakers all night, but now there was nothing, just silence. Then I heard footsteps. Slow, heavy footsteps echoing through the empty store. I turned a corner and froze. The man in the brown coat was standing at the end of the aisle, staring at me. But he wasn't alone. Behind him, there were more people, men and women, all dressed in old, ragged clothes. Their faces were pale. Their eyes were hollow. They stood completely still, like mannequins. Then, all at once, they took a step forward. I ran. I ran straight to the front doors. I didn't care about my job anymore. I just wanted out. But when I reached the doors, they didn't open. I slammed my hands against the glass. "Help!" Outside, the parking lot was empty. No cars, no people. Even my own car was gone. It didn't make sense. I turned around and saw Mark standing at the self-checkout, staring at me. "Mark, the doors won't open," I shouted. Mark just smiled. "I told you," he said. "They never close." Then his face started to change. His skin turned gray, his eyes sunk deeper, his mouth stretched wider. And then he wasn't Mark anymore. He was one of them. I ran back into the store, my heart pounding. I needed to find another way out. I ran down the aisles, past shelves that seemed taller than before, past products that looked old, dusty, like they had been sitting there for years. Then I saw something that made my stomach drop. Aisle 14. But it wasn't just one. There were 2, then 3, then 5. The store was changing. Every aisle was turning into aisle 14. No matter which way I ran, I kept ending up in the same place. and standing in the middle of it all was the man in the brown coat. He grinned at me. "You belong here now," he whispered. I felt my legs go weak. My breath came in short gasps. I didn't want to be here. I wanted to go home. Then I saw the security room. I sprinted inside and slammed the door shut. The security monitors were still on. I grabbed the keyboard and tried to rewind the footage, desperate to see what was happening. And that's when I saw something I will never forget. The store had been empty all night. There were no customers, no Mark, no me. I wasn't on the cameras. None of this made sense. I turned away from the screens and the door was open. The man in the brown coat stood there. "They never close," he whispered. Darkness swallowed me whole. When I woke up, the store was quiet, empty. The lights were dim. The shelves were covered in dust. I walked to the front doors. They were locked. The parking lot outside was dark, stretching endlessly into nothing. Then I heard the beep of a register. I turned. Mark was standing at self-checkout, smiling at me. "Break's over," he said. I looked. I was wearing my Walmart vest, my name tag, and I understood. I had become part of the store. The night shift never ends, and Walmart never closes. At first, I refused to believe it. I couldn't be stuck here. This had to be a dream, a nightmare. I turned away from Mark, ripped off the Walmart vest and ran. Maybe if I found the back exit, I could escape. Maybe if I broke a window, I could get out. But the store had changed again. The aisles stretched on forever. The shelves were taller than they should be, rising up into darkness. The fluorescent lights flickered, humming like they were alive. And then I saw them, the customers. They moved slowly, their heads twitching unnaturally as they walked between the aisles. Their faces were blank, their eyes empty. Some pushed carts full of nothing, their wheels squeaking in the silence. Others stood still, staring at shelves filled with rotten food, their mouths slightly open as if they had forgotten how to eat. I backed away. And then, all at once, they turned to look at me. Their faces didn't change. No expressions, no emotions. But they knew I was here. I ran without thinking. My legs burned, my breath came in short gasps. Every turn led me back to the same place, aisle 14. The same dusty shelves, the same flickering lights, the same rotten smell in the air. I stopped, my heart hammering in my chest. And then, slowly, I turned around. The man in the brown coat was there. He stood in the middle of the aisle, smiling at me. "You can't leave," he said softly. I clenched my fists. "Why? What is this place?" He tilted. "You already know." The lights flickered again, and then everything changed. The store was no longer a store. The walls were peeling. The shelves were rusted. The air smelled like mold and old paper. The fluorescent lights above buzzed like dying insects. I looked down at my hands. My name tag was different now. The letters were faded, scratched. And then I saw the register. A single checkout lane stood at the end of the aisle, its conveyor belt covered in dust. The screen flickered, displaying a total of $0. I felt something move behind me. I turned, too slowly. The customers were closer. Their faces were still blank, but their mouths had changed. They were open now, wide and gaping. Their lips curled unnaturally, stretching into jagged dark holes. They reached for me. I stumbled back, hitting the conveyor belt. The screen glitched, the numbers flickered. And then, for the first time, I heard something. A voice. "Did you find everything okay?" I turned to the register. A cashier stood behind it. She was dressed in an old Walmart uniform, her blue vest tattered and stained. Her hair was long and dark, covering half of her face. But I knew her. I had seen her picture before, on the employee wall. She had gone missing 10 years ago. Her lips moved again, but her voice didn't match her mouth. It was a distorted, static-filled sound, like an old tape being played backward. "Did you find everything okay?" I opened my mouth to scream, and then I blinked. The store was normal again. Bright lights, clean floors, stocked shelves. The familiar hum of Walmart music playing softly through the speakers. And then, for the first time, I heard something. A voice. "Did you find everything okay?" I turned to the register. A cashier stood behind it. She was dressed in an old Walmart uniform, her blue vest tattered and stained. Her hair was long and dark, covering half of her face. But I knew her. I had seen her picture before, on the employee wall. She had gone missing 10 years ago. Her lips moved again, but her voice didn't match her mouth. It was a distorted, static-filled sound, like an old tape being played backward. "Did you find everything okay?" I opened my mouth to scream and then I blinked. The store was normal again. Bright lights, clean floors, stocked shelves. The familiar hum of Walmart music playing softly through the speakers. And then, for the first time, I heard something. A voice. "Did you find everything okay?" I turned to the register. A cashier stood behind it. She was dressed in an old Walmart uniform, her blue vest tattered and stained. Her hair was long and dark, covering half of her face. But I knew her. I had seen her picture before, on the employee wall. She had gone missing 10 years ago. Her lips moved again, but her voice didn't match her mouth. It was a distorted, static-filled sound, like an old tape being played backward. "Did you find everything okay?" I opened my mouth to scream and then I blinked. The store was normal again. Bright lights, clean floors, stocked shelves. The familiar hum of Walmart music playing softly through the speakers, and underneath it, in small glitched letters, was a message. "See you at aisle 14. The screen flickered. Then it went black. I took a deep breath. I wasn't free. I never would be. Walmart never closes, and neither would I. I never thought I would be scared of a Walmart. It's just a store, right? A place full of people, bright lights, and never-ending shelves of stuff. But after what happened to me, I will never step foot in one again." It started like any other night. I was coming back from work, exhausted and half asleep. I needed a few things: milk, bread, and maybe some snacks for the weekend. My usual grocery store was already closed, but the Walmart down the road was open 24 hours. I pulled into the nearly empty parking lot. There were a few cars scattered around, but the store looked quiet. The automatic doors slid open with a soft whoosh, and I stepped inside. The place was almost empty. A few employees were stocking shelves. A tired-looking cashier stood at the only open register, staring blankly ahead. The bright fluorescent lights buzzed softly, flickering every now and then. I grabbed a cart and started walking toward the dairy section. As I passed the toy aisle, I heard something, a small giggle. I froze. It sounded like a child laughing, but it was weirdly off. Too sharp, too echoing. I looked down the aisle. Nothing. Just rows of dolls, stuffed animals, and plastic toys. I shook my head and kept walking. Probably my imagination. I reached the dairy section and grabbed a gallon of milk. As I turned around, I saw someone standing at the end of the aisle. It was a man, tall, wearing a dark hoodie. He wasn't moving, just standing there, watching me. I felt my stomach twist. Maybe he was just another shopper. Maybe he was waiting for me to move so he could grab something. But he didn't move. He just stood there. I cleared my throat and pushed my cart forward. As I passed him, I kept my eyes straight ahead. My skin crawled. He smelled wrong, like old meat left in the sun too long. I turned the corner quickly, wanting to get away. But when I glanced back, he was gone. I let out a shaky breath. I needed to hurry up and leave. I grabbed the rest of my items as fast as I could, barely paying attention to what I was throwing in my cart. The store felt off, too quiet, too still, like the air itself was waiting for something to happen. Then the overhead music cut off. Silence. I stopped walking. A second later, the intercom crackled to life. A voice whispered through the speakers, low and scratchy. "Get out." My heart slammed against my ribs. I spun around. The employees were gone. The cashier was gone. I was alone, or at least, I thought I was. A sound echoed through the aisles. Footsteps, slow, heavy. I gripped my cart tighter, my hands sweaty. My mind screamed at me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. Then the lights flickered again. And that's when I saw them. Figures, shadows, moving in the aisles, not walking, gliding. Their shapes were human-like, but wrong. Too tall, too thin, their heads tilted at unnatural angles. One of them stepped closer, and I saw its face, or rather, lack of a face, just smooth, empty skin where eyes, a nose, and a mouth should be. I couldn't breathe. Then it whispered, not out loud, inside my head. "Stay." I let out a strangled scream and bolted for the front doors. My cart crashed to the floor as I ran, my heart pounding. The shadows moved faster now, rushing toward me, stretching across the floor like dark fingers. I sprinted down the main aisle, dodging fallen signs, and knocked over shelves that I swore weren't there before. The automatic doors were ahead, so close, then they slammed shut. I skidded to a stop, slamming my fists against the glass. "Help!" I screamed. "Somebody help me!" The parking lot was empty. The cars were gone, as if they had never been there at all. I turned around, my back pressed against the door. The figures were closer now, silent, watching. Then one of them grinned. A mouth tore open in its smooth face, stretching too wide, filled with rows of jagged black teeth. I don't remember what happened next. I think I passed out, because when I woke up, I was in my car, parked outside my house. My groceries sat in the passenger seat, neatly packed in bags I didn't remember checking out. My hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel. My heart still pounded in my chest. I turned to look at my house. The lights were on inside. But something felt wrong, like something followed me home. I don't go to Walmart anymore. And every night when I turn off the lights, I swear I hear something moving in the dark. And sometimes, I hear that same whisper in my head, "Stay." It's been weeks since that night at Walmart, but I still feel watched. At first, I tried to convince myself it was just a bad dream, that maybe I was sleep deprived, hallucinating from exhaustion. But things started happening, small things. I'd wake up and find my front door unlocked, even though I know I locked it. My TV would turn on by itself, playing nothing but static. Shadows moved in the corners of my house, just outside my vision. Whenever I turned to look, they disappeared. And then there were the whispers. At night, as I lay in bed, I would hear them, soft, distant, like someone was right outside my bedroom door. "Stay." I barely slept anymore. One night I woke up gasping, my heart hammering. I had the same nightmare again, trapped in that Walmart, running from those faceless things. But this time, something was different. This time, in the dream, I didn't wake up in my car. I woke up inside Walmart, but the doors were chained shut and the aisles stretched forever. It's been weeks since that night at Walmart, but I still feel watched. It's been weeks since that night at Walmart, but I still feel watched. At first, I tried to convince myself it's been weeks since that night at Walmart, but I still feel watched. At first, I tried to convince myself it was just a bad dream, that maybe I was sleep deprived, hallucinating from exhaustion. But things started happening, small things. I'd wake up and find my front door unlocked, even though I know I locked it. My TV would turn